We begin, as we do each and every single week, by introducing my co-host, Ruben Bressler,
Hello.
Aaron Campbell.
Happy Wednesday.
Yeah, it's the Wednesdayiest. Tell you what. And we got a hell of a show tonight. Tonight, I didn't expect us to have anything to talk about when we ended last week's show. We took them spoilers and we stretched them. We took them all the way out to the show because there wasn't a lot else to talk about. And then something happened, and then something else happened, and something else happened. We got some huge topics to talk about tonight.
It's Magic Rules Christmas.
It's unbelievable. And we're going to start with the first pick. The biggest thing, and it just came out of friggin' nowhere. I thought it was going to be one thing, it is not. It is proxies. Proxies in Magic. The idea that I can scribble Black Lotus on a plains, use it as a Black Lotus in a tournament environment is not okay. Wizards officially has said no WPN store may run sanctioned or unsanctioned with proxy cards. Now this was originally set up for there were proxy cards that they actually gave you in World Championship decks many years ago, so you could make your own Magic cards and have some fun with that. Whereas but now there were tournaments, there's legacy tournaments and vintage tournaments that happen all over the world that they want to, that they want to be able to use 5 proxies, 10 proxies, whatever. There's communities and there's people who really rally around it. Like if I don't have $500 for Tarmogoyfs, but that's the only thing that I am missing out of this Jund deck that I worked so hard to build, can I not run this event? And so much kerfluffle was had, much confusion was in the ranks because no one really knew based on what a WPN rep had told a store that got broadcasted here, and then someone else said something different, and then all of a sudden we're talking about like counterfeit cards, and now proxies are in the counterfeit realm, and then finally Helen comes up, and I'm going to pull it up on the screen, which as far as I can tell, let's start here. I'm going to pull up the Trick Jarrett's Reddit reply where he says, first, an important clarification, proxy cards are used as substitute cards created by judges and so on and so forth. I know that feels crazy that we regard marker on a card as a counterfeit, but remove the visual accuracy from the judgment and they serve identical purposes when it comes to gameplay. So and everyone's freaking out. Everyone promptly wigs out. Helen goes on Twitter, and we have here last night around 4:45 in Eastern Standard. She says this is entirely about stores running tournaments for profit, not about playtesting. So you don't have to worry about having proxies while you're playing.
You don't have to worry about Matt Tabak hiding in your dresser drawer, popping out and being like, "I knew it."
No, it's not going to happen. So playtesting in the store, you're trying to play some standard when you don't have those cards, that's fine. But for events, trying to profit off the idea that you don't own all of the real Magic cards is something that can't happen anymore. Aaron, what is this? What happened?
Okay,
What
so
is this? Is the right question.
this is
What
all
is happening?
this is all about what they call plausible deniability. And this reminds me of when I used to work at an adult bookstore, and I will keep this PG, I promise. We used to sell pipes, and specifically we sold water pipes. And obviously
I
we
know exactly
that
where this is going, and I love it.
we know what people are using them for. You're not using them for tobacco. You're most likely using them for marijuana. But we know that we can't agree with that, but we have to, when we sell it to you, it's with the understanding that it's for tobacco use only. And we used to have these little disclaimers that we would include with every purchase that said, I understand that I'm using it for this purchase. If you use it for something else, we are not responsible for that. However, there were people that would walk in and they would say really obvious things like, oh man, I'm gonna get choked tonight or baked tonight or something. And when they say that, we couldn't sell them it to them anymore because they were breaking the deniability. They were outright saying, I'm gonna get high with this. And at that point, we had to cut them off. And there was someone on Reddit who brought up something similar. He was like, this warning was given to one store. This was a private communication. The policy on proxies has always been what it was. It was originally meant just to be for use by judges if a card was damaged and things like that. Ultimately, Wizards doesn't care. They're sort of like winking at you where it's like, oh, well, a proxy does this. And the responses that we've been getting from Trick and Helen have basically been the winks. Like, this is the policy. But when people keep pushing it, like the people at the store did, when the people kept coming in saying, I'm going to get high tonight, you're forcing them to double down on the policy and to keep up the deniability. And so all these people that are just running this, what happens if I walk in the store with a proxy? You're the people that are spinning this out of control. I really appreciated this response, because that's basically what it is. By blowing this up, you're forcing them to enforce policies that they ultimately don't care about, but they have to because you're pressing the issue. And so it reminded me of my bookstore days and having to enforce the smoking policy.
My one of the things that was tweeted to me was that
I just love how you worded that. I thought that was perfect.
Thank you.
It was a terrific analogy. Well done. One of the things that somebody tweeted to me was that there was a tournament that was broadcast with Proxies being featured. And that's what cued this. I don't know if that's the truth, but it certainly sounds like something that would trigger that type of response. Like, oh, you know, all weekend long you show people with like Sharpie on the thing, and it was supposed to be for tournament Magic. You know, and then of course there's the whole awkward that literally the day before Wizards links to an SCG versus video that has them using printed proxies.
But it wasn't an event, though.
It wasn't an event. It wasn't a tournament. They weren't trying to profit off. Well, you know what I mean. They weren't. They weren't in a profit making situation with those games they were playing.
Right. The games themselves were not for profit. The winner did not receive more than the loser did theoretically.
And it couldn't be
the
classified
thing is
as an
that
event.
they are. I mean, this is where the gray is, right? Obviously, it's not going to be it's not a public event where there are prizes when you're playing kitchen table Magic, where you've written kitchen finks on a basic planes. And clearly, it is going to be a situation where that they're trying to avoid if it's at a store in what used to be like vintage pro. We used to have vintage proxy events in the Midwest all the time. Mean Deck used to do the Mean Deck Open, which had limited or unlimited proxy events constantly, and we loved it. It was awesome. That's the kind of stuff it seems like they're talking about. But then there's these halfway situations, like as was pointed out by Kibler and several others. Like, is it a profit-making situation when you are two people playing Magic and making money off of the YouTube revenue or off of the subscriber fees from Star City games? Is that the same thing? And unfortunately, that's a question that needs to be asked, considering that we're supposed to be stopping asking questions, right? Just hope that this goes away. So, there's these little, they're thin margins with a couple things, but 99.9% of the situations are going to be black or white, and so you should be able to figure out by yourself and just stop asking, right?
Yeah.
Just stop. The moral of the story.
Stop bringing it up awkwardly. And well, now it's been brought up, and now like it's blown up, and there's these threads of just like, well, Wizards is just overstepping their bounds. What is going to make you quit Magic? Like, isn't enough? And I'm like,
girl,
it's been pretty rough. And we're going to talk about not only some of the stuff that made people very upset, but also the redemption and whatnot that Wizards is doing as a response to it. But so we're going to have to move into get out of the townsfolk. Coincidentally enough, while we're talking about it here, to talk about the response today that was posted by Elaine Chase called "Learning Opportunities." It's on the screen now.
Love her.
She's great, and where she wrote an article and she kind of explained that they have, Wizards has learned some lessons. And they're changing some stuff, and there were some investigations that happened, and there's some separate, and there's left hand that may not be talking to the right hand. There's different moving parts, and it's not one single entity that controls all things at all times. There were 10 suspensions of the 12 of those who, correct me if I'm wrong, these were people who were just connected to the Facebook group. That's all they had. They could have been there, they could have seen it. They had no idea if this stuff was real or not. Wizards, for God's sakes, until this moment, and I think it's a little ridiculous, but until this moment, I'm going to move the guy to townsfolk, they did not actually say when spoiler season was starting. They weren't saying previews happen X to Y. They would say there were going to be some cool stuff happening to PAX, but they won't even tell you if there's spoilers during it. Well, at least they used to not. They used to say like, oh, you better pay attention to PAX and blah, 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 blah. It's like, okay. And now they're like, okay, there's going to be a big Battle for Zendikar preview thing. Okay, great. That's awesome. When did Battle for Zendikar preview start? Sometime between here and there. We may have something special coming out. We may not. That's actually a problem. We need to know when previews happen, because if that's the thing that we know and we're aware of, and we see something weird, we can tell them about the something weird. Hey, this doesn't match up to your timeline. This doesn't make any sense. Elaine was very specific. I thought this was very interesting. I'm bringing it back up. Elaine was very specific that Wizards does not do anything cute. Like, I have been giving them credit throughout the years of like being like, super, clandestine, like leaving the wastes or leaving what was it? Evolving Wilds or something. Was it found in a parking lot?
Yeah.
And there was a random common that was found in the wrong booster. And that's how a lot of things slip out. And
there was there was a populate card that was randomly found in a booster of a different set.
Correct. And so it was really interesting to me that they were just like, this does not happen. We do not do things this way. We don't drop them somewhere for a random fan to find, and we don't orchestrate leaks. We officially and overtly give previews to partners or post them via our own channels, and that's it. And that's awesome. You got to start telling us about it, because you can't come back later and be really upset that we didn't know this was real or was not shareable or not okay when you never told us the preview seasons were started. I think that's a big step forward.
Yeah. This is weird. This whole situation's been weird, right? Like, this is different than the Rancred Elf thing that happened in the early 2000s. This is different than the the leaks that we've had in the past. Somehow this felt very different. And I think it was because that these leaks came from a place where I think that those who the blame ended up being laid on were taken by surprise. They were not actively looking to be leakers,
right?
At least for the most part. And so this was sort of a wake-up call for WotC to be like, wait a second, we don't want to, accidentally harm our base trying to be too careful, right? And so this was, I really appreciate the way that this letter was worded from Elaine. And the thing that I mean, as someone who hoped that this would happen, I was like, all right, good, this happened. Reading this, in the second to last paragraph, she says, we've had many instances in the past of players proactively coming to us with unauthorized information they've stumbled across, and we've been fortunate to avoid a number of significant leaks because of their help. A hero of Return to Ravnica, you know who you are. What? That's great.
That is great.
She's just, in a public statement, publicly addressing something that, to my knowledge, has not been talked about at all ever.
Correct.
In any level on Reddit by anyone at WotC. So this is the kind of thing that's happened before. I think that everything that this letter is about is a force for good.
It seems like a whole different sea change from what we've been used to. Aaron?
Yeah, I appreciate that she clarified, the fact that they don't do just leaks. They don't orchestrate leaks. They don't give things to random fans. As she says, we officially and overtly give previews to partners or post them via our own channels. I also like that she stressed the patient zero theory, which was what Helene talked about on MTG Focus, because there were a lot of people who listened to that and didn't really get it. And there were people that were like, well, what if I'm on Salvation and I see a card that I'm like, can I retweet it? It's like, that's not what she said. And Elaine stressed that. She was like, if you get something privately, like in a private group, a direct message or an email, that should set off warning bells. It's not if you saw something on a French forum. It's not if somebody was on Twitter and you retweeted something, because that's really where I saw a lot of the paranoia coming from. What if I like this and what if I don't know? She really stressed that it's, what you should be looking for. And if you are concerned, how you can go about that. And yeah, I thought this was a nice do-over, if you will, of the previous messages.
I know that, from having personal and private conversations that, I think Wizards is very much wanting to try to do things differently and trying to have a more forward, response and approach. And I think, these types of responses are exactly the way they start to get back that credibility with the community, and they get that kind of goodwill, and they stop this weird animosity, and it's like us versus them mentality. It's really like, guys, we don't want our stuff stolen. Isn't it?
Right.
Isn't it obvious we don't want our stuff stolen? Would you help us not get our stuff stolen and spoiled? That we'd really appreciate that. We know you didn't sign any NDAs. But we'd really appreciate you helping us out.
If you didn't steal our stuff. Yeah, I mean, It is a little ridiculous if you think of it from WotC's perspective to be like, you shouldn't steal from us. And we were all like, oh, but we've always stolen from you. What's the problem, right? And not but it's like, we got the coins that Robin Hood stole. right? So like we're not technically breaking the rules, but we're benefiting. And so like we understand why WotC's doing it, but the way WotC responded scared us, right? It kind of scared everybody because then we were reminded that, you know, the Iron Giant has death lasers and can actually kill us. Spoiler alert. But you know, it's nice to know that they're still, even though they are all powerful in terms of the rules of the game and how they dole out punishment in terms of magic and the cards and all that, that they are still on our side and that they are, you know, attempting. They're valiant in the effort, at least.
No matter, even if you still disagree with it, you still think it's messed up and they should do something totally different. I feel you can still tell that something's different in this response than your average normal. Like, and it's the same thing with Helene. Helene going on the MTG Focus, is that correct?
Yeah.
MTG Focus podcast, talking to Roberto, the guy who took the shotgun blast to the face.
Right.
Helene, head of organized play in the world. That's a big deal.
On
that
a
is
road
totally
trip
different.
over a holiday.
Doing it on her own
she was
time.
Probably like
Way out of her way.
Yeah, I mean, she was probably like I think she was on the road because she was posting pictures of like where she was going as she was driving through America. So she was probably on the road, maybe in a hotel room, maybe in a car, maybe at a rest stop. She didn't have to do that.
I do want to point out before we close out this subject that Roberto Gonzalez, the 9th place finisher of Pro Tour Montreal of what was that, Gatewatch, who's the guy he's been very active in the Magic community, and he's the guy that got the big suspension. He was not a part of this. He was not a part of the alleviation of the judges getting. I don't know. Are we going to go to the talking about how the judges' suspensions were changed?
Yeah. This is what we're talking about. Like basically, they got rid of 10 of the 12 suspensions for the judges. They basically said, effective now, they're back, and we're not going to hold it against them in the future. But the guys who got anything above those initial, like the 2 who didn't appeal, and everyone else, you know, who was not kind of mentioned, but kind of mentioned by default or implied, their suspensions were not changed at all.
Right. I just wanted to mention that Roberto has not heard back yet. But he has heard that they have received his appeal. So that will be a news story for another time. Yeah.
And I hope it's a positive, you know, result because, you know, the guy has given a lot to Magic over the years. And, I mean, I've known him since since I was taking Magic cruises.
Jeez.
And filming talks about World Wake. You know what I'm saying?
Word.
That's pretty good.
That's how long it's been, guys.
Yeah, I mean, it's, you know, there are more shoes to drop for sure.
Right. All right. So so that great thing happened, honestly. I was really surprised by that. That's sweet. Yeah. And we're going to move into Desperate Ravings. Now, our friend Jeff Hoagland, he's a friend of Magic. He's a friend of yours.
Your friend and mine.
You know, sometimes things get a little salty.
We only kid because we love.
We do. Jeff is I've met the guy. I think he's awesome. I love that he helped me build a deck one time. Helped me learn how to play a deck when I was in Knoxville. Guy's awesome. Children are cute as can be. He's smart as a whip. Sometimes I think he lets it get to him, and then he kind of lashes out, and it gets a little bad. But
don't we all? I
know. And so he lost his temper here. I think understandably so. He wrote an article that just got posted right before we went on air, which we'll talk about here in a second. But let's get started here. First thing, Jeff Hoagland makes top 8 of the SCG Open. And by the hair of his chinny chin chin, we're talking he literally beat 7 other people who had the same record to make the 8th spot. That's a hell of a, you know, just by your fingernails clawing over the finish line. He got there. He's filling out his, you know, what do you think about X and Y info sheet type stuff. And then he gets called over by a judge. Judge says, hey, FYI, your sleeves are marked and you're getting a game loss. And he then posts game loss in top 8 for marked sleeves. Never effing using Legion supplies. Hashtag SCG char, 0 warnings, right to game loss. So that was a hell of a thing. And he just wrote an article on MTG Card Market, who apparently
I'll link it here in the chat for us.
Great, he's apparently writing for now, which is cool. And he talks about how he just barely got there. Hey, you know, can you come here for a second? And the cards in your main deck have more wear on them than the sideboard. This is an identifiable pattern, and as such, you'll be getting a game loss. You know, no conversation. No, you need to change out your sleeves. You know, no, just like you're screwed. And so he talks about it, and then he kind of goes here at the end where he says, you know, the aftermath and, you know, thinking about things and looking back at things. You know, he was very lucky to make top 8. And one of the most important things he notes here is it is easy to place all of the blame on my loss on Legion Supplies for making a less than stellar product, or on the judge staff for being too harsh. The reality of the situation is I should have been more diligent about the state of my gear and was in throughout the course of the tournament. It was an expensive lesson to learn, but he has learned it. The judge staff at an event is not out to get you. I cannot even count the number of times I've heard someone express that judge does not like me. Without judges, we could not have events. They are there spending their weekend not playing, so we can, appreciate what they can do. And I think it's really cool, and something I know before in the pre-show where, I feel like we have a lot of maturity that comes through when bad things happen, more so than a lot of other game communities that I've seen. To me, I've seen a lot of game communities that just freak out over everything, have huge rants, completely, laden with bad language, and they're just saying how these people are the worst things ever, and I can't believe these are the worst things ever, and everyone jumps in, they get their pitchforks, and it's great. And Magic does that a little bit, and then oftentimes we kind of come back to earth, and then I think Wizards is starting to do that more often. And here you see this thing that happens it's very reminiscent to when the Tarmogoyf thing happened, the foil Tarmogoyf, and Owen Turtenwald writes this big treatise. He was like, what, I was wrong when I reacted that way. It was a mistake, and I wish I hadn't done it. And here's what I think. And I think you kind of make these big steps forward, and you don't often see that in big community members. A lot of times you just see the outrage and the upset. And then that's what they're known for at that point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's this is a very mature piece. I encourage everyone to go read it. And it underlines a very important point that a lot of people, unfortunately, simply don't learn at any point in their life, which is you should take responsibility for yourself. And Jeff did, to his credit in this case. It is unfortunate that he had sleeves that by the end of a tournament, one tournament, from what I understand, he had only used these for this one tournament, 9-10 rounds or whatever, were so worn and torn that the judge deemed it necessary to issue a game loss.
15 rounds, for what it's worth. 15
rounds?
Right, both
All
days.
Right, fair. Still, a sleeve should last longer than 15 rounds, and that is probably what Jeff thought going into the tournament.
Right.
And so it's unfortunate that this happened. However, we're going to come out on the other side of this thinking how reasonable Jeff is. It is very difficult in the situation, in the moment.
Right.
You can be livid, and he obviously was, and I would be too. But given a few days to reflect, then having a positive spin on a very tough situation, it's great. Yeah.
Aaron?
+1 points. Well done.
Yeah, this is scary. I didn't know the circumstances behind this. Like, I saw the tweet when it went out, and I'll admit there was a little bit of, oh, girl. Like, just, because he blew his top a little bit. There was a little part of me that's like, oh, and then this article just came out. And even then, I was like, oh, buckle up. Like, I was expecting some craziness. But yeah, he was surprisingly level-headed, and I really did feel for him. And it kind of scared me a little bit, because I've had warnings in the past where I've had a deck check happen, and I usually carry like 5 or 10 extra sleeves with me, just in case. And in the past, whenever I've had a deck check, there have been times where the judge will say to me, hey, girl, we found a ding on 1 or 2. Do you have any extra sleeves with you? Can you just re-sleeve, and we'll call this a day. We won't make it a thing. Right. So for it to automatically go to a game loss, it was like, holy crap, what happened? And, I have friends who are judges, and they were telling me about how they typically only go to a game loss if there's some sort of pattern there, meaning that, like, let's say it was the same 4 cards or things like that. And that made sense. Like, I could see if every copy of Birds of Paradise had a ding to it, fine. But when they're saying that, like, your main deck has more wear than your sideboard, that's happened to me before, and I've never thought anything of it. And I've gone to events like, oh, it's whatever. And I've played in events where I still have sleeves, my Hallelujah sleeves from Japan. I've used since October, and in my mind they still look good. But even I was kind of like, oh God, like, are they? It just seems really subjective. Where it's like, oh, and so I'm a little afraid now. And now going forward, I think I'm just going to be using new sleeves every time, because I don't want this to happen to me.
I've gotten some of like the good guy judges. I think is a meme that I think you can kind of parallel here where they're just like,
Yeah.
hey, I was noticing that your sleeves are pretty worn. You might want to change them out for next round, or you might want to take a look at the ones there that have those corner dings on them, and like, they pointed out things that are on the table or what have you. Like, I've gotten that over the years where, again, it's just like, just so you know, I think you should change out your sleeves because this could be a problem. And obviously I think that's great. And so this is the first time I've really heard of anything like that where they didn't say, hey, you look like you have marked cards or marked sleeves because there's so much wear. And they didn't immediately say, can you get new ones? Or do you have replacements? They just said, well game lost, GG.
Look, if I am of the opinion that if you give 20 people a game loss and only one of them is cheating for actually consciously cheating, if 20 people are given a game loss for marked sleeves and only one of them is consciously doing it, it was worth giving the 20 game losses. That's how I feel about it. I think that the judges do a good job, and that a game loss is not a severe enough punishment to really completely flip a table over. Certainly, if you're given a match loss over something like that, or suspended for some number of months, then you need to have more of a history than just the one tournament. But in this particular case, I feel like I agree with the judges. And also, this whole episode is just proving the point even more that, boy, judging is hard for as hard as they work. And they are there before you show up, and they stay there until well after you leave, and they got a tough job, and they got to be good at human resources, and they got to be good at numbers and rules, and
right.
Man,
it's interesting
I
how
don't envy it.
They're limited on how they can accessorize, and they can't bedazzle their outfits. And
I'm not a lawyer, but doesn't the justice system work literally opposite of what you described earlier in terms of the 20 people who got dinged and the one making it worth it? Because
what do you mean?
Well, if 20 people were innocent, or if 19 people were innocent of murder and one was guilty.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
But
I'm just noting. I have to
take it
point
into
that
a
out.
real world scenario. Let's say 20 people accidentally walk out of the store with a bottle of water that they forgot to pay for.
Okay.
Only one of them was consciously shoplifting, but all 20 of them should be fined. Maybe not all 20 of them should go to jail. They shouldn't all get match losses, like I was saying, but they should get dinged so as to prevent future situations like this from happening. That's just the way I look at it. And I'm willing to be wrong. This is just the way I look at it now, because I grew up in the Wild West days of Magic. Greg Hatch wrote a great Facebook piece, a post that might be my favorite article of 2016 by the time we get to the end of it, where he talks about how we don't want to go back to the Wild West days of Magic. That's not a place we want to be. We don't want to have to specify high roll, right?
Oh, wait. This is spilling directly into our next topic.
Well, he did say he was prepared to be wrong, so
I'm prepared to
Nice.
be wrong.
So let's roll into that so we can give some nice context, because context rules. And we have, hold on a second, the windows decided to disappear because reasons. We were going into the red zone, ladies and gentlemen. And in the red zone, we're talking about a Pithing Needle. We're talking about Bradley Carpenter. Let's get the story. Now, Pithing Needle, for those not fully aware, is a 1-mana artifact. You can name a non-land card when it enters the battlefield. And actually, you can name a card, can't you? Just a card.
You can name a card.
And its activated abilities can't be used unless they're mana abilities. Okay.
Right.
Bradley Carpenter, this is the Reddit post here. Bradley Carpenter is issued a game loss. Or I'm sorry, he doesn't issue a game loss. He's issued a bad ruling for him because he was playing against Goro's Vengeance, and he played Pithing Needle, and he did not say Baborgamos enraged. He said Baborgamos. He said, what do you name Baborgamos? Like, okay. And then it came up. Baborgamos, here he is, and he tries to use his activated ability, and bad, judge calls happen, and what's going on here? And he is given the ruling that he named Baborgamos the card that no one plays in Modern versus Baborgamos Enraged, which actually then kills him, obviously, in true poetic justice. Couldn't have killed him in any other fashion. And yeah, we have, again, what could harken back to the Wild West. You have
Gotham style days of Magic.
Where like you would do things like basically it would feel like you were doing things to your opponent when you had Demigod of Revenge that had a trigger that said when you play Demigod of Revenge, return all copies of it.
Flashbacks.
Oh yes, you return all copies of it with the same name from your graveyard into play. It was a really sweet card. And what would happen is you would play it, and they would cryptic command it, and then you would say after it was countered, you would say, okay, triggers resolve. Your Demigod trigger resolves. It comes back into play. Their cryptic command basically did nothing. That happened all the time. Esper Charm. Remember Esper Charm? What emoji? Who you targeted?
Target myself with Esper Charm is another famous example. Yeah.
Because only the discard targeted, whereas the draw did not. So when you said the wrong word, gotcha, you screwed up and it gets held against you. Those were some incredible feel bads. It's almost as bad as damage on the stack, where you have those situations where you go, wait a minute, you don't understand Magic like you think you do, and this screws you over. It can harken back to that. So, Aaron, tell us how you feel about this issue. I want to hear it.
Which side are you on, Aaron?
Here we at.
I'm on team Borborygmos Enraged.
You should have named the entire card.
You should have named the entire card. And the reason why I feel that way is because people like to point to the fact, and the argument on Reddit was, he knows what's in Bob's deck list, and he knows exactly what card he was attempting to name with it. If you have the deck list in front of you, and assuming that Bob filled out his deck list correctly, the deck list should clearly say, how do you pronounce it? You pronounce it very interesting. You say Borborygmos?
He said
Borborygmos?
Borborygmos.
You said Borborygmos.
I say Borborygmos.
That's what I do. I just thought it was funny. But if he's looking at the deck list, it should say Borborygmos Enraged. And so if you have the deck list in front of you, I could see if he didn't have the deck list in front of him. I could see if this was like round 4, and you said that. I get it. But when you have it in front of you, the deck list clearly tells you what the card is. I'm somebody who uses Cabal Therapy quite a lot in Legacy. And I've been on the other side of it. There was one time where I cast Cabal Therapy and I called Firestorm when what I really wanted was Fire Blast. And I remember the opponent revealed the hand and I was like, that's the card. That's it. You've got 3 copies. Buy card. And he's like, yeah, you named the wrong card. And I know that if I'm playing Cabal Therapy, I need to know what's in my opponent's deck. I need to know the difference between Firestorm, Fire Blast, whatever. And that's just something, if you're going to play that card, you need to know what you're doing. And if you have a deck list in front of you that tells you what that card says, and I seem to recall that there have been some recent efforts to make people be more specific when they're filling out deck lists, that you can't just be like, Sarkhan, bad Sarkhan. And they're just like, no, it's Sarkhan the Mad, right? Yeah. And so if I remember correctly, you have to be specific when you're filling out deck lists. You can't just say Liliana OTV. What? And so if it applies to a deck list, if you have to say Borborygmos Enraged on your deck list, then I feel that when you play Pithing Needle, you should also have to call it Borborygmos Enraged, and I don't feel bad. Sorry.
I think that there is the spirit of the law and the letter of the law. I think this harkens back very much to Pat Chapin's unfortunate, awful, uncomfortable as hell interaction where he all of a sudden was drawing extra cards when in reality everyone could see everything at the time. They knew that he wasn't cheating. The letter of the law does this so people don't cheat. The spirit of the law says because tens of thousands of people aren't watching them play Magic. So when you're in a world where, if someone has... All right, so let me riddle you this before I let Ruben go, because once I let Ruben go, he's going to be off the chain.
Yeah.
Let me riddle you this. If I had a Pithing Needle and my opponent had an Arcbound Ravager in play, I play it and say Ravager, does that work? Does that count? If I touch Arcbound Ravager and say Ravager, does that work?
Nope.
I could touch the card and say Arcbound or say Ravager, either or, does not work.
Nope, not on my watch.
I'm seriously gonna have an aneurysm.
Ruben, go! I gotta, dude.
I can't with this anymore.
Come on.
Okay, so back in my day,
that's where we're gonna start. That's
back
where we
in
start.
my day, people used to write about things like this and be like, "Look how bad I got this guy," and it was like heroicized and made everyone was like, "Look at me! I said profane command with all of my legal targets, and he thought that my Chameleon Colossus had fear, but it has pro black. High five!" Right? That's a real thing that happened in real life.
Yeah.
You go back and look it up. It's great.
Yeah.
And I thought it was great back then too, and I thought it was hilarious. But because I could defend myself We want people to keep wanting to play Magic, right? This is the kind of thing that makes people quit Magic.
Correct.
It's period. It's end of the argument here, is that the rules are not fighting for you. And if you see a person's deck list and you see that there's only one version of Borborygmos in their deck, if there were Borborygmos and Borborygmos Enraged, or like Venser's Shaper Savant, Venser the Sojourner in the same deck, that could be a realistic thing. And somebody was like, Venser, right?
I would be 100% on board with letter of the law in that case.
Yeah, that's fine. If somebody's playing Nicol Bolas and Nicol Bolas Planeswalker, and you name Nicol Bolas, by all means, you did it wrong. But if there's only Borborygmos Enraged in the deck list, and you see the deck list, and you know what's in your opponent's deck.
And the deck list clearly states that it's Borborygmos Enraged.
Correct.
Right.
Okay, there's intent, and then there's letter of the law. Right?
Woo. Oh my god.
So, I'm really trying hard to not get into analogies, because I think that it just gets ridiculous from there. But I'm really... in this case, it's clear to me what the intent was, and I think that for everyone involved, it's clear what the intent was. And in this case, to me, what I think could have happened, I'm not a judge, I'm just speaking purely as a commentator here, as someone who's seeing the situation from the outside. The judge should have stepped in and asked the opponent, not the controller of Pithing Needle, something along the lines of, what did you understand your opponent to mean? Right?
When your opponent said Borborygmos...
Was there a tacit understanding between the two of you? Say something along those lines and see where the discussion breaks down.
But that could be considered, that could be seen as leading, though. Like, you're leading to, you know how, like, in courtrooms, like,
no, and I understand what you mean, but it could also just be like, you need to clarify what you understood the situation to be, because to understand that your situation is your opponent is like literally just an idiot and doesn't know the matchup and doesn't know that you're running this card. It seems like a stretch. I think, like, really,
but if
you
somebody
say,
asked me that question when I think I'm confident, like, let's say I'm confident in Arcbound Ravager, going back to that thing, and let's say you haven't played a Ravager yet, and I go to play an Arcbound Ravager, or I play Pithing Needle, and I name Arcbound Ravager.
What if I name Bob?
No,
Aaron?
it's Dark Confidant.
So you would make me say the name of the card.
Absolutely, it says name the card.
Okay,
What
all
if
right,
I
so
said
here we go.
Tabernacle at Pendrell Vale and not the Tabernacle at Pendrell Vale?
No,
I'm trying
all
to
right.
find out where the line is here.
Okay, Aaron, all right, because I got to do this.
Bring it. I'm a big girl.
You got to tell me about the Pithing Needle story you told me earlier.
Okay, so I was at SCG States, top 8 competitor, by the way. Thank you very much. And I was playing Ad Nauseam, and my opponent had never really seen Ad Nauseam, which is fine. And I beat him game 1, and then game 2, he brought in a Pithing Needle, and he couldn't remember what the name of the red card was that killed him. So he was like, Lightning Cloud? And I was just like, okay. So then I did Angel's Grace, I did Ad Nauseam, I played Lightning Storm, and then I held priority, and and then I blew his face off. And apparently you said that the card they name has to be a legal card.
In the format, yes it does.
In the format. And so that brought up an interesting thing of, is it up to me then to verify that Lightning Cloud exists? I didn't know that there was no such card as Lightning Cloud. All I knew was that he named a card that was not the card that I needed to go off. But in my defense, and in anyone's defense if they're listening, if you're not sure what the name of the card is, you can ask a judge. You can say there's this card, and it costs this, and she did this, and this, and they'll tell you the name of the card. So my opponent very well could have done that. He could have been like, I can't remember the name of this, blah. But apparently you were saying something about inaccurate board states?
Well, what I'm saying is it is both, like, just like it is both players' responsibility to have life totals correct and to have other, things correct in terms of the game state. That game state was then incorrect. It was that they named something they literally could not name. And so when someone does that, you have to say, well, what card do you mean? Because that's not a card. And maybe that leads them down the path of understanding they should have meant Lightning Storm, or they shouldn't. And then they ask a judge and they say, well, it's this weird red card. And they go, yeah, it's that one. And that's fine. But, at the same time, that's that weird situation where it's like, in that scenario, you were, and again, I would hope that a judge can correct me if I am incorrect here, but I want to say, from everything I've read about this whole kerfluffle over Pithing Needle and all these people getting pissed off, is you have to name something that is legal in the format. So there is a card named Shackles in Modern. There's a card called
in Legacy.
in Legacy. Sorry, okay. So there's a card called Shackles in Legacy.
Yeah, it's an Apocalypse aura. It has activated abilities.
No,
yeah.
it's Exodus and Invasion.
Oh, okay.
But regardless, yes, it's a white card, and white and 2 colorless. Enchant creature doesn't untap during its controller's untap step, and for a white mana, you return it to its owner's hand. Really neat.
Okay.
Whatever. Gerard got locked up because they did every story point ever on a card always. Anyway, so there's that card. Shackles exists. If you're in Legacy and you Pithing Needle and you say Shackles, that's what you named right there. Totally legal, totally understandable. And when I am Super Spike tournament player, I will absolutely take advantage of that. And that was the Wild West they keep talking about, where you say, gotcha, you didn't understand how damage on the stack works. Gotcha, you didn't understand how the stack works. Gotcha, you didn't understand how naming cards of Pithing Needle works. Like, you get yourself in situations where you're just making people hate Magic, and it feels like you're a rules lawyer rather than playing the game that you both understand you're playing.
I will concede the following point. He should have specified a unique quality of the card. I always do. I over-enunciate. I name the Sword of Feast and Famine. I name Vidalcan Shackles. Like, I talk for a living, so I just go full,
Shackles.
I full on it. 8.5 tails. Like, I completely over compensate when I'm trying to do it, because I want to be careful. Right? Mm-hmm. Because this is all trying to make Magic a more fun game for everyone involved. Mm-hmm. And if I stick to the letter of the law, the game is more fun for everyone involved, because everyone knows where I'm at, and there's no gray area. It's very awkward. But in this discussion, there are points where, let's say you're playing against a German player. Stay with me. Aaron, you're playing a Legacy tournament against a German player.
Hi, Buddha.
And you have a Runed or your opponent plays Runed Halo, naming Sturmgeist. Sturmgeist. There is a card called Sturmgeist in Invasion, and then the German version of Storm Spirit is translated to Sturmgeist.
Okay.
Are you going to make him take damage from your Storm Spirit?
Oh gosh, I do feel that this is different than the Borborygmo situation, but I will still answer it. Man.
Yeah, it's tougher. What if your opponent's deaf? What if your opponent?
Oh, okay. Now
doesn't
we're going
say
there.
Names out loud.
Now we're aiming for the fences.
Let's not go quite to the deaf people.
I'm asking. These are just questions that are. You said you had to name the card. Those were your words.
Well, you can write it down, for God's sakes, if you can.
Okay, that's fine. That's a fine answer. I'm just asking.
I actually can't answer the German one. I need more time on that one. Like, we're on a
That's
time
fine.
show, so I can't. But I'm open to it.
But it's interesting. It's an interesting twist.
There's a deeper level here. I didn't mean to get you with questions. I'm just
totally.
I'm trying to. I just want the game to be accessible and grokkable to everyone, and this kind of situation turns people off of Magic. And I don't want people to be turned off of Magic because of a rules lawyer thing.
But to be fair, I play Dredge. I don't really. I put people off of Magic all the time.
Well, look, all right. So look, when I'm a Spike, I like playing in tournaments. And when I play in tournaments, if someone draws a card, they don't get to go back to their upkeep. Like that just doesn't happen. Why? They crossed the threshold. They did a thing. I understand. But when in my experience, I will say that this type of crap never happens at the pro level. Brad Nelson playing Brian Kibler is going to name a Borgamos, and they are both going to understand what he meant. And Brian Kibler, if he was playing that deck, would not say, well, he just named Borgamos or whatever. They wouldn't. Why? Because they understand what people like. There's this gentleman's agreement. There's none of this gotcha crap at the top levels because everyone knows what they're doing. Everyone knows what they're here to play. And when you have those kind of gotcha moments, it creates animosity. It makes people lose respect. It makes the game look bad because again they're just like, well, why did he get a game loss? Well, because he didn't name it the exact thing, but he got close. Well, he's only running one of the card of that name in it, right? It's a really unique name. Yeah. Well, then why did he get it? Well, it's hard to explain that. It feels very much like back in the day when you said, all right, I'm going to put damage on the stack with my Mog Fanatic. And they're going to go, what? And you're going to go, yeah, and this is going to screw up your entire board state. And they're like, what just happened? And I'm just like, well, let me explain this thing that didn't go your way because you didn't know the intricacies of it.
The best way to end my point on this discussion is because we're probably not going to end up agreeing on this discussion, which is fine.
Yeah.
The best thing that you can do is avoid the situation entirely. Name the full card, or correctly identify what it does, or it's the Borborygmos that's from the new
Or ask a
Ravnica
judge if
set.
you're not sure.
Right, you can always ask a judge. I'm not sure what the name of the red sorcery is, but it puts charge counters on itself, and it's from Cold Snap, and like you have to correctly identify something about the card. Now, a judge may or may not believe that you have correctly identified an individual card. So you just need to educate yourself. You just need to know what is possible. And unfortunately, that's probably the best way to defend yourself from situations like this happening. It's also unfortunate that this happened in such a public setting, because I think that people saw it and it didn't pass the really test, right? Like if you're doing this with your friends at home, if you're just on kitchen table magic and you're like Borborygmos with Pithing Needle, and they're like, all right, Borborygmos and Rage, kill you. And you just like stare at your buddy across the table and be like, really, guy? Like, is that real?
I mean, look, man, when you get to
it doesn't pass that.
You get to the top level, you have Kenji. You remember that story about him stopping people with the pact?
Yeah.
And he was so upset that he'd only stopped 4 out of the 5 from drawing their card before they died.
Yep.
Like, there's once you get to that level of you're so good at Magic, it's like crazy, weird, awesome. Like, you can literally feel them radiating that they're better at Magic than you are. Like that stuff just doesn't happen because they understand that that's not what being good at Magic is about. Is trying to get these weird angle shooty, make people feel terrible and make Magic not look good and make you look like you're just like trying to take advantage of people. It just doesn't happen, man. It's not, but it's stuff that happens in lower type of levels because a lot of competitive players feel like, well, this is the angles I have to shoot. This is the strategy that I have to use in order to get ahead, in order to, make something happen in Magic. And what I've seen in my experience, meeting all these guys who are amazing and make their living off Magic or make a huge chunk of it or are super good at the game in general,
right.
They just don't do it.
Now, the other thing I wanted to point out is that it's really tough to be the judge in this situation, right? Like when you have a rules lawyer situation on your hands and you're a judge, you follow the letter of the law. I feel the judge didn't really do anything wrong here. They followed
I'm not saying the judge did anything
rules
wrong.
of the game. It's just I wish that there was more. You could be more creative as a judge, in terms of doling out punishment or in terms of how to handle certain situations. And I sometimes feel like judges are handcuffed by some of the rules and the regulations that they have to follow. But that's a different point entirely. Again, it's really tough to be a judge.
I do want to say, though, that I wouldn't be opposed to, if they, like we talked about the deck list and we talked about how, they made an effort to make people be more specific with their deck list, and that there are tweaks to policy that you can do to sort of create wiggle room or to create some breathing room. And I have to say, I wouldn't be opposed to that. Like, if this incident gets enough attention where the judges are like, well, maybe going forward we don't have to be as stern with that. I wouldn't have a problem with that at all. Like I'm not that jerk who's like, no, you need to keep it this way. But as it stands right now, if you're using a card that says name the card, I'm gonna make you name the card.
Sure. And if you're playing for 5K like these guys were, then
right, and I mean,
what?
if I'm at,
I should name I should name the right card.
Right, and
what I'm saying is that the fallout is bad.
Yeah, and I mean, if I'm at F&M or somewhere,
never have arisen.
Right, and I mean, if I'm at F&M, I probably wouldn't do this because again, F&M's what, casual REL?
Right.
Casual REL.
Well,
but I mean, like when you're top 8 at an open, oh no,
okay.
Like. No.
Well, again, that's the question. That to me, like, when stuff gets real and they draw their card with a pact, you're dead. Like, and that's the end of it. But, there's certain things about, like, for me, the spirit of the law, the intent of the rule versus, you see Chapin losing on camera, it really awkwardly when thousands of people are watching him knowing they didn't do anything wrong. And in case I see someone who I think obviously had in their mind what they were naming, didn't go all the way, and sure. Now they are well, this could happen to you. This is the, this is.
And I guess
this is
because
warning.
I've been hardened in the forge of getting scummed when I was 12, 13, 14. I'm more callous to this now. Like I know I'm supposed to name the whole card. I know I'm supposed to stack all my triggers correctly and explain everything perfectly and keep track of how much mana I have in my mana pool when I'm storming and keep everything copacetic. It's different for, most people haven't been playing Magic as long as we have. Most people are relatively new to the game.
Right.
And it's situations like this that turn people away from the game, and I just don't want that. I said I was willing to be wrong, and I certainly was wrong on one front, which is that the blame does not rest on the opposing player. The blame rests on every single person involved in the situation and the culture around which makes this possible. We need to change we as players need to be the change we wish to see in the game. And I can promise you that if I'm in the same situation, which I won't be because I'll just name every card, but if I'm in the same situation and my opponent is like Borg Barigmos, I'll just be like, that's the one you meant. Like I would not extend that situation any more awkwardly than would be. Then again, I am not I'm a public figure. So like I have more equity to lose by doing this to someone else.
Sure.
Right? There are other factors involved.
I
don't know. I wasn't in the guy's head. He could have other factors involved for him. So, there's lots of things at play here. The bottom line is I just want there to be a resolution to this style of rule addressed in the next rules update.
Sure. I'm open to that.
Sure. And again, I think it's one of those things that we don't have to, you don't have to come down on the side of, well, because you didn't know this or because I'm angle shooting here, bad things are happening.
Yeah.
But right now, that's where we're at. Right now is you didn't name the thing. Sucks to be you.
And I'm not gonna. I know a lot of people who know exactly where the line are.
Oh yeah.
Where the lines are. Where the line is. One of the two. And they take advantage of, and they always stay just behind the line. Not touching you, and that's fine. I can respect people who try to get wins. They use all their fouls, as it were, like in basketball.
Sure.
And it's like, that's fine, but I don't want to do that personally.
Fair enough. All right, so let's turn the corner as we do each week. We go down to the finisher, and the finisher this week, well, last night, President Obama gave his 7th and final State of the Union address for those who lived in America. That happened. The president gave a big speech. And as it says in the Constitution, the U.S. Constitution, the hosts of Magic Mike shall from time to time give to their viewers information on the state of magic. So, what is the most pressing thing you guys have to share about, with the Magic Nation?
Well, I think that we really have to build a wall. A wall to keep those damned goblins out of our life totals.
I like it. You're not feeling the burn there, Aaron?
No.
No?
That you see a mountain up there? No, I am not feeling
fair.
the burn.
All right.
Ruben?
Aggressive. Oh. Nation, we need to bring to light the pervasive issue facing our world of global splashing.
Look, as a leader of a brood myself, I'm interested in the reinstatement of No Scion Left Behind. Okay?
I love it. Bring No Scion Left Behind back.
That's right.
For all those Irwin tokens that are running around.
Oh God,
Yeah.
those need to be Eldrazi. If anybody's listening and you do art or altars, you need to make the Eldrazi Scion like little Irwins. You
my
need
God.
to.
All the Irwins.
I will buy them.
Of course. So, ladies and gentlemen, that is our show. Aaron, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Ruben, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you guys for watching us live. We really appreciate it every single week. We bring to our final slide here where we say thank you very much for watching. We hope you support us at patreon.com/magicmics. You can visit our website at magicmikespodcast.com. That exists thanks to our Patreon supporters. Or follow, like, tweet, favorite, share, and do everything social that tells people that we exist. Catch us online at twitch.tv/magicmics, on Twitter at magicmikescast, on Reddit at reddit.com/r/magicmics, on Facebook at facebook.com/magicmics. Talk to us privately at magicmikespodcast@gmail.com. Follow the audio-only podcast at magicmikespodcast.libsyn.com, or find us on iTunes, or join us here next week, same time, same place, for another episode of Magic Mikes. Good night, everybody.